Carlos, I follow you, and you cover a wide range of stories of how the lives of immigrants, migrants are being impacted at this time. When you look at what's going on with these detention centers, what information are you hearing from people about what's going on?
Well, the first thing, it's very important to realize that this is not anything new. These are tactics that Trump used during his first Trump administration. I remember in 2018, I visited the El Paso Processing Center. I was able to get in. And when I spoke to the detainees, I'm like, how do you feel today? They're like, we're very happy you came. And I asked why. And they're like, this is the first day that they clean up and they give us these basic necessities because they knew you guys were coming. So, they kind of made things look a lot better. And so when you talk about members of Congress not being able to visit, a lot of times it's because they need this time to prepare and polish things up. But I also have the ability to actually contact people inside. I get calls from people, I get letters from people, and you see the reality. I mean, they tell you, like you said, there's mothers who haven't spoken to their children on the outside for months. They don't have access to attorneys. They get intimidated. They get harassed. They say, we're going to send you, to countries in Africa if you don't sign your deportation, which has already happened. There's Colombians living in Africa right now because they've been sent there instead of their home. I mean, there's just so many things.
But the DHS secretary says these are child predators and murderers.
And so this is like, you were mentioning, this is the pitch that they have. And the reality is that there is a small portion of migrants who have been arrested, who have committed these crimes. And I think we're all on the same page that, yes, there should be, punishment for those crimes. But the vast majority of people who are getting detained right now are people who have been here for 15, 20, 30 years, working hard, paying taxes, contributing to society. And the question is, what do we gain as a country from having people like that detained and suffering and subjecting them to these inhumane conditions? It just doesn't make sense from an economic, from a social, from a moral perspective. And this administration is just outright lying.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask you, when you talk to people inside, because so few people have actually had access to these detainees, what is next for them? In other words, the idea is that there's a process here, that you're detained, waiting for a hearing, and then we see what happens after that. But that doesn't seem to be happening for the most part.
And so that's the thing. There's not really a process anymore. So there used to be, when Trump came in, people say, okay, well, there's a way things work. If you get detained and you've been here for X amount of years, you have a right to an attorney. You have a right to potentially get a bond in most cases. One of the first they did is they eliminated that in most of the country. Now attorneys are resorting to habeas corpus and other mechanisms. They're trying to eliminate that as well. When it comes to immigration judges, Trump is basically just purging all the somewhat progressive immigration judges, as he calls them, and he's putting in his own people who have a direct order to deport as many people as possible. So the system is being just shifted and rigged in a way that there's no due process anymore.
So you go to El Paso and you get in to the facility.
Yeah, this was many years ago.
Okay.
I don't think they'd let me in anymore.
So
No.
you're an influencer as well. That's what I was going to ask you. If you took a United States senator or a member of Congress, could you get them in?
No.
So capable.
So this was actually many years ago, before I started creating content on social media. I went as part of a research project through the University of New Mexico. Now I've tried to go a few times, and they always put a lot of barriers. I've actually gone with members of Congress. I was with Sylvia Garcia, who's from Houston, and it was a huge show of this is a member of Congress. You have a right to go in and inspect, and they're putting all these obstacles and all these barriers and all these things that just make it difficult. So the way I'm able to actually stay informed with a lot of this is family members will tell me, or people have my phone number inside. They'll call me, they'll send me letters, but there's just so much, that we aren't able to see that. We know is happening, but they don't let you go inside to actually verify it.
And it's important to point out that the rules are being changed every step of the way, let alone basic American procedure and law and justice and due process. I mean, you're in a detention center. God knows what the future is for you because they're not following any procedures as far as we can see. Let everybody in, let Congress in so they can see what's happening in there. As far as we know, people are being held, sometimes without reason, for many, many months. And I know that there are issues with this word, but, when someone is just plucked off the street and put in a detention center and doesn't get a hearing and doesn't have a way of communicating with anybody, that's frightening. That's un-American. That's disappearing somebody. But also obstacles and barriers as it pertains to who gets picked up on the street. Like, for example, the rules have been changing every step of the way. 2 years ago, you might have been in process to get your papers, and you might have been okay. Today, you're not. DACA recipients, now they're changing the rules on that. There's new demands on green card applicants. Specifically, most green card applicants will now need to return to their home countries to apply for permanent residency. Name one person in a situation where they are concerned that they are going to get detained because they don't have this, who would want to go to an airport or anywhere right now. So if they're too scared to travel, then how can they go back to their home country? Talk about the changing of the rules.
It's good that you brought up DACA because that's a very specific example. So Trump hasn't eliminated DACA yet, but one of the things he's done before, when Biden was president, the processing time to renew your DACA was usually between 2 to 3 months. Now they're taking up to 7, 8 months, and so there's a lapse where you applied for your renewal, but it doesn't come in on time. Your current status expires, and so now you have this 1 month, 2 month, 3 month period where you don't have DACA anymore because the renewal hasn't come in. And we've seen a lot of DACA recipients who have been here their whole life getting detained in this point, and they're saying, "Oh, well, you don't have a status," but that's not your fault. You sent in the application, or you sent the renewal in 6 months ago. But now they're, intentionally delaying things and making it as hard as possible. So you fall into this legal trap, and then, you're left without any option.
And talked about the green card change.
Yeah.
At minimum,
this is
hugely expensive, hugely inconvenient.
It's impossible.
But more than that, I think there is a real fear these people aren't going to be allowed to come back.
No, I mean, that's just another thing. You talk about, doing things the right way and following the legal process. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing an attack on people who are following the legal process, because when people go apply for their green card and adjustment of status, they're willingly showing up to a USCIS office. They're following the immigration process. And now the rules are being changed out of nowhere. And the worst part, with no seemingly logical reason, there's no net benefit to making these changes. Most people who are applying for adjustment of status are people who have been vetted, who have been here for a long time, who have been contributing, who are married to U.S. citizens, who have U.S. citizen children, family members. I mean, what is the point? The point is cruelty. The point is hurting others. It's corrupting the system. It's making it as hard as possible. And, I mean, it's just what it is.
So, Carlos, we're fascinated putting all this together, what it means for votes coming up in the midterms. For example, the state of Texas, Tallarico is there against Ken Paxton. We've seen, for Donald Trump anyway, he's just hemorrhaged Latino voters in this last year and a half since he got kind of historic support for a Republican candidate in 2024. What do you believe the political impact will be? You can take Texas as an example, but you can look across the country of all this cruelty that we're witnessing.
So I think what we're seeing because of all these things is an activation of people who never consider themselves to be political. You'll talk to them and say, "I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican," but they care about their family, they care about their mom, they care about their dad, they care about their spouse, and they're voting because they see that what this administration is doing is just so cruel that they want to get political for the first time. So I'm speaking to a lot of people who are saying, "Hey, I've never voted before. I've been here for many, many years. They were maybe born here. They've been citizens their whole life. Never really had that initiative to go out and vote. But they see their friends, their family members, their loved ones being detained, and it's activating them politically. And I think the Democratic Party needs to do a good job of selling something to this population, of saying, "Hey, we're not just going to go against what Trump is doing, but we have a path forward." Because the reality is we're in this situation because we have a fundamentally broken immigration system that's been broken since before I was born. So who's going to be the politicians and the party that's going to come in and fix it once and for all?
You found a calling with the work you're doing for people who feel powerless and upset about what is happening and are following this, wanting to help in some way. How can they?
Well, I always say we live in the most amazing country in the world. We have a democracy. We can vote. If we're unsatisfied with things, we can, raise our voice and get active politically. And I think a lot of people take that for granted in this country, especially speaking to people who are detained in ICE detention centers. They come from countries where you can't vote, where you can't, say, "I'm against what this government is doing." So I think just a simple fact of saying, "Hey, this is not okay," sharing some of these things that are going on social media, registering to vote, actually going out there. I tell that to people in Texas all the time, like, "Hey, you don't like what's going on? We have a great guy you can vote for right now, James Tallarico, and if you're in other parts of the country, other candidates as well. And together we can make a change." So it's really in our hands, and that's what keeps me going. But other than that, it's just little things. Ask your neighbors, how are they doing? Are you okay? Do you need any help? Do you have any family members maybe we can give a lending hand to? And together as a community, I think we can take care of each other in a very special way.